Hey, have you ever thought about having a podcast of your very own? If so, great news. Spotify has a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money. It's all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. So, Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer. So, no matter what your setup is like, you can get started creating as soon as today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify, and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify, so that's pretty cool. And with Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, I really just feel like it's taken my podcasting to a whole nother level. So I highly recommend you give it a try if a podcast is something that you've been thinking about as well. Just download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Hey there, I'm Julie, and this is the Married to Addiction podcast. If you're here, then you're probably what I call my secret sister. We're in a situation we never asked to be in and fighting a battle we never wanted to fight. We're faith-filled women who are married to an alcoholic, and it affects every inch of our lives. If that sounds like you, then this is a safe place for you to land. Married to Addiction is a faith-based podcast where I help you find the tools and strength you need to navigate your husband's addiction without losing yourself in the process. So please subscribe and tune in as often as you can, because your husband's recovery is important, but so is yours. Hello, and welcome in to episode 60 of the Married to Addiction podcast. Today's episode is titled, When is Faith Not Enough? That title's kind of an eyebrow raiser, right? Because isn't faith always enough? Isn't that what we've been taught? Well, faith is critically important, of course, but today we're going to talk about how to find the balance between having faith and protecting yourself. So we've talked about protecting yourself before. Today we're going to go a little bit deeper into how to do that. So this whole concept kind of reminds me of the snake handlers that you hear about who get bit by venomous snakes and then they refuse the anti-venom and they just pray and they die. So to me, that's a very good example of the fact that God does provide miraculous healing sometimes. Of course, there's been plenty of examples of that in the Bible that we know about. However, we are also expected to do what we can do on our side of things to protect ourselves. So while we would all love for our husbands to be divinely delivered from addiction instantaneously and our marriages to be miraculously restored, that's not usually the way that it works. So we need to talk about some lines. Where's the line between faith, protecting yourself, etc.? Excuse me. So what I teach both here and in my programs, my membership, etc., is not about trying harder, doing better, all of those things, trying harder for your husband. If you're just a better wife, if you're just whatever, it's not about that. What I teach is about learning how to get out from under your husband's addiction and protect yourself in the process. So there are some firm lines in the sand here. While boundaries, detaching, not enabling, all of those things are ways to protect yourself. If you are ever dealing with any type of abuse, that is not okay. So as I've said before, if you feel like you're being negatively affected to the point that it's dangerous for you in any way, then that needs to be addressed. There are several different kinds of alcoholic marriages. There's varying degrees of alcoholism and, where that person is at in their journey through addiction. In my situation, it was not dangerous. My husband was not violent. He was not physical with me ever. In some situations, that's not the case. There is that women are dealing with. So you have to discern whether or not boundaries and all the other things are enough in your situation, or if you need to take the next step to get help. So in my situation, even though it wasn't dangerous, I did almost have a breakdown. I did feel like I was very close to needing to be hospitalized myself, but that was more because I was taking it on as my responsibility to fix things. I was accepting all of the responsibility for getting my husband sober. I was doing all of the things that were just making me drown in his addiction, that were pulling me under, that were destroying me, basically, because I was taking all that on. I did not give it to God. I did not understand that I needed to detach. I did not have good boundaries. I did not have boundaries, period. I was obsessed and addicted to the addiction. That's what almost took me down. That's what almost led to the breakdown because I was taking it all on as my own. I was not protecting myself. See the difference there? It wasn't just because of my situation. It was because I wasn't doing what I could do to protect myself. And that's why I teach women how to change that now. So sometimes God does swoop in and deliver relief. But more often, he leads us to other things that we can use to help ourselves, which can not only help us right now with the battle that we're in at the moment with our husbands being addicted, but it also strengthens us for future battles. The things that we learn during this time are things that we can then take into our future that can help us forevermore. And that's been the case with me too. My husband is over 5 years sober now, but all of the things that I learned for, tools for dealing with addiction, 90% of that stuff applies in other relationships and other situations, like especially in my spiritual walk, the things that I learned about leaning on God and what that really looks like and how to be able to do that effectively and all of the peace that brought to my life and just so many things, so many things. And that is why getting help is so important. So if you are one of those people where the line in the sand applies to you and you are in a dangerous situation, that needs to be addressed first and foremost. But if you are like I was, where you are drowning because you're not protecting yourself, maybe you don't know how. Maybe you don't know what to do. Maybe you hear all these words thrown around like boundaries and detaching, and you either don't understand fully what it means, or you've tried it and it hasn't been successful because you don't really know how to do it, effectively. Or maybe you just don't have any type of support, which is the case for a lot of us. So many times when we're in this situation, we just are an island because we don't want to talk to anybody about this. And even when we do, they don't understand. They don't fully grasp, all the layers of this, both on our side and our husband's side. And so a lot of times when we're in this situation, we either don't know what to do, or we don't know what to do correctly, or we feel just so isolated that we just are drowning. We're just drowning. We feel lonely. We feel confused. We feel frustrated. We feel overwhelmed in every single way. So whether you get help with me or whether you get help with somebody else, it's just so vital to do that because faith is super important. But God also gives us tools and brings us resources that can help us even further and help us learn how to take care of ourselves, which is our responsibility at the end of the day. Of course, I have the Secret Sister Circle available for you if you want, further guidance and help with that and support from a group of amazing, encouraging women who are all going through this together. But regardless of, like I said, if you get help with that or you get help somewhere else, please just get help. There's a joke that this reminds me of too, this whole topic, and not that it's anything to be joked about, but it's a really good example, I feel like, of when faith is not enough and how that can look. So it's a joke about, I can't remember if I told this on the podcast before. Maybe I did, but if I did, humor me. I'm going to tell it again. Basically, it's a joke about a guy who was in a situation where there was a flood. And so he, the waters kept rising, and it eventually got to where he got up on his roof because the water was really high. And so he was sitting up there on the roof, and a, a little boat came by, like a little canoe or something came by. And they said, "Hey, we're here to rescue you. Do you want to come down? It's flood. It's getting dangerous." And he said, "No, I'm waiting for God. God's going to rescue me." And they were like, "Okay." And they left. And then a little bit bigger boat came by because the waters are, really rising and kind of scary now. And so another boat comes by and they're like, "Hey, we should probably get you out of here. Like, it's a very dangerous situation where you are right now." He's like, "That's okay. God's got it. He's going to rescue me. It's good." And they're like, "All right." So they left. And then the fire department finally comes overhead when the water is like literally up to the roof where he's getting ready to get swept away. Fire department comes by in a helicopter and like drops down a line. And they're like, "Hey, you need to get up on, out of the water. You're in danger. It's like you're in peril right now." And he's like, "That's okay. Thank you. But God's going to rescue me. God's got it." And so they flew off. And sure enough, the waters rose and the guy drowned and died. And he got to heaven and he's like, "Lord, I don't understand. Like I was sitting there in faith, believing you were going to rescue me." And God says, "I sent you 2 boats and a helicopter." That joke always makes me laugh. And I don't know if I told it exactly right, but you get the message. Sometimes we're praying for an answer and for a solution, and God sends it right in front of our face, but we don't recognize it as being that, or we don't accept it as being that, or we don't necessarily sometimes want to have to do the work on our side. We just want a divine intervention. And so that thing just, goes on its way and we sit there in our misery. So I just want you to think about that. Sometimes our answer is God bringing you something along in front of you that's meant to help you. So just try to keep that in mind. So I hope that's been helpful for you. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Quick question for you before I let you go today. Have you been to the Married to Addiction website? If you haven't, I would love if you would go pay it a visit. It's just marriedtoaddiction.com. And over there, you can see just a lot of different information about my podcast. There is a blog on there. There's some free resources for you. And there's also a few ways that you can actually get some help if you need a little more help and direction and support as you travel this difficult path with your addicted husband. So if you haven't yet, please go visit marriedtoaddiction.com. Thanks so much.